Greetings, my name is Peter Hayes and I am one of the many descendants of the Reenogreena Hayes of County Cork, Ireland. Now, if you've watched the first video of the photographs, which were pre-1930, you will have had a brief history lesson on the family and basically the family tree from around the early 1900s. So this concerns my grandfather and his 8 siblings. Now, my grandfather left Ireland in 1917, joined the British Navy, and 5 of his siblings left Ireland to go to America, New York originally. So in 1932, one of those siblings, Ellen Hayes, that had gone to New York, came back to Ireland with her husband, Bill Purcell. Now, they married in New York in 1927, and they made the trip back over, as I say, in 1932. And thankfully, they brought a camera with them. And that camera is still in our possession, more of that later. And it is an Eastman Kodak 3A camera taking 1:22 film, which means that the prints are postcard size. So we are lucky enough to have some of these prints, and indeed we have some of the negatives, which I've managed to scan, which make up these 1930 to 1935 films. So the photos here are from that period. If you wish to know more about the family history, I suggest you watch the previous video, the pre-1930. But fundamentally, the people featured in these photos are Julia and Jack, who were sister and brother to my grandfather Michael. They stayed in Ireland. There's Eileen, who was Julia's daughter, born in 1929, so she's just a little girl. The photos also feature Mary Hayes, who was my grandfather and Julia and Jack's mother. She was born 1869 and died in 1944. And also featured is Nellie Hayes' husband, Bill Purcell. There are a few other local people also, but we're not able to identify them. I'm filming this in England on what must be one of the hottest days of the year. So if I look like I'm expiring, it's probably because I am. I would also say at this point, I am not an expert. I am in possession of these Hayes photos, and I'm trying my best to understand them, who's in them, why they were taken, and where they were taken. So as I say, I'm not an expert, but I do think it's important to know where you've come from, and we are so lucky that we can trace the Hayes family back on Reenogreena over 200 years. There's an awful lot of people in the world that have originated from that tiny place. So I hope you enjoy the photos. If you're family and you recognise anybody in them that I don't recognise, please put it in the comments below or get in contact with me. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy seeing them. Thank you for watching. This is an Eastman Kodak 3A camera built in the early 1920s in America. We found this at the house and believe it is this camera that took the majority of these photos around Reenogreena between 1930 and 1940. The camera is complete with a leather case and was more than probably brought over by Bill Purcell and his wife Nellie, that's formerly Ellen Hayes, in around about 1932. The camera uses 1:22 film. This produces postcard size prints of around about 3¼ inches by 5½ inches. Once you've opened the camera up, the lens pulls forward and you can see the bellows of the camera. I know very little about cameras. I'm just thrilled that the actual camera that took these photos still exists, and think of all the family almost 100 years ago who handled this camera and marvelled at it. It was truly a wonderful find at the house. Now the first picture is a fascinating one. The little girl at the front is Eileen, aged round about 3. Now Eileen was born in 1929, so I'm guessing this picture is around about 1932. She's sitting on her mother Julia's lap. Now Julia was my grandfather Michael's sister. Julia was born in 1906, so she would have been around about 26 in this photo. And the very stern-faced woman behind the half door there is my great-grandmother Mary. Mary was born in 1869, so she would have been around 63 here. Now, this is taken outside the old cottage. And obviously you can see the thatch and the peaked roof on the top of it. But what's very interesting is I believe Julia worked as a seamstress, and you can see a couple of dresses hanging to the left-hand side of the photo. Now, I've based many of these pictures' ages on this photo because I can fairly accurately determine Eileen's age in this, but it's a rather lovely photo. You'll notice the aspect ratio. This is the 1:22 film, which gives you a postcard-like print. So the next photo is taken outside the cottages. I've actually studied the stones on the bottom right hand side, and they correspond to the stones that are still there outside the cottage. And we have my grandfather's siblings, namely Ellen Hayes, who was born in 1892. She was always known as Nellie, and she married Bill Purcell, so obviously ended up as Nellie Purcell. And we have Jack, who stayed in Ireland. He was born in 1904 and he never married. Nellie was obviously visiting at this time. She lived permanently in New York with her husband Bill, where he worked as a chauffeur, and she seemed to have a variety of jobs, working as a shop assistant in a department store, and she also worked as a tram conductress. We have a photo of her doing that. The next photo is also outside the old cottages, and at the back on the left we have Jack again. In front of him is his mother, my great-grandmother Mary. The woman next to them, I'm not sure who that is. The man to the right of that woman is Bill Purcell. So I would assume that Nellie probably took this photo, and the previous photo was taken by Bill Purcell. I'm guessing these were taken at the same time on the same day. You can see the thatch on the cottage behind, and you can again see the stones to the right of the people standing there, which correspond to the previous two pictures. Now this photo has Jack, who's smartened himself up somewhat in a suit, and Bill Purcell also looking very smart there. This, I believe, was taken at the top of the hill in Reenogreena, so some sort of 300-400 yards away from the cottages, overlooking the hills there. This is another photo of Jack, taken probably at more or less the same time. He looks exactly the same age, and it looks like the same suit, but with a different tie. Right, now the next set of photos get quite interesting. So this is taken on the rocks up at Reenogreena. You can see in the background there's a gentleman standing there overlooking proceedings. I think, as I've said before, a camera must have been quite an unusual object to be found in rural Ireland at the time, so I imagine locally there was great interest in it. Now, the people in the foreground, there's two girls there who I really don't know who they are. A splendid looking gentleman at the front with rather prominent ears and a cap, and again I don't know who this is. But if we move right, the woman in the background with the face scribbled on is Julia. Now, quite why her face is kind of blocked out, I really do not know. That's the way we found the photo at the house. And then to her right, we have Jack sitting with a young child on his lap, which I'm going to presume is Eileen. Then we have a slightly older woman in black, who, again, I don't know who that is. But to the right of her, that's Nellie. Looking quite sort of dapper in a hat there. I imagine she probably came back from New York with clothes that her Irish family had never witnessed before. And she must have caused quite a stir, I think. So we have that picture. Now, what I've done with it, I actually printed this off and it's up at the house. I cheated somewhat and I took a picture of Julia from another photo and transposed it in. So please don't criticise my editing skills, but this is the picture that now hangs at the house. Now, this wasn't the only picture taken that day, so we can now move on to the next picture. Now, the next picture was obviously taken at the same time. The same people in the photo, apart from the gentleman at the back. Nellie's got the same hat on. And again, curiously enough, if you look at Julia, who's at the back centre of the photo, she's had her face sort of drawn over with some sort of pen or pencil. Interestingly, in front of Julia, you can just see Jack, who is sitting behind the two younger girls, and you can just catch sight of the hat of Eileen there. So he's obviously still got Eileen on his lap, but he's obscured by the two girls in front. You've got Nellie to the left-hand side of that, and that rather splendid gentleman on the left at the front. Now, curiously, this was a photo, but we found some negatives at the house. Very old, obviously, you know, virtually 100 years old these were. And this is a negative of the same photo. And so you can very clearly see Julia there, and you can see Jack and the two girls at the front. The negatives are a very funny size, and my scanner won't actually take the whole print, but you get the general idea here. So exactly the same photo, but from the original negative. As ever, Nellie is looking directly at the camera. It's lovely to see Julia with a smile on her face. And interestingly, Jack seems very, very fond of Eileen. They weren't renowned for getting on, but he generally seems to have an attachment, a fondness for her in these photographs, which is lovely to see. Now, the following photo after this has got Bill Purcell in it. So if you look towards the back, you'll see Julia standing there in what I would guess is some sort of floral dress. And then in front of Julia, you've got Bill Purcell. Now, Bill Purcell's always very easy to find in a photo. Very distinctive features. And next to him you have Jack, and then on his lap you have Eileen there. And then the two girls in front, obviously, and the aforementioned rather splendid gentleman on the left-hand side. But obviously all these photos were taken at the same time. I imagine there was great excitement with a camera. Most of them had never probably seen a camera before, didn't even probably know what they were posing for. But obviously they had these photos developed. I'm going to guess they took the photos back to America. I can't believe there was a photo processing plant in or around the Reenogreena area. So I presume they took the film back to New York, had it processed, and then sent it over to the family. And I should think they were amazed when they saw these first photos of themselves. Now, there's one more photo which is not taken on the same day, but is in a similar location. And this has Nellie again with her mother, Mary, my great-grandmother. And to the right of her, that is Julia and a dog. Now, again, I have no explanation why the photo is like this. Very obviously, Julia's face has been cut from the top. Perhaps they put it in a photo on its own. I have no idea. This is all that we found at the house. Again, Nellie, bless her heart, looks absolutely splendid. They must have wondered, who'd come into their lives from America with some very, I was going to say eccentric. I'm not going to say eccentric, elegant clothes, shall we say. And Nellie there staring at the camera as she always does. Interestingly, there might be another explanation for the style of clothes that Nellie wears. If you look particularly at this photo, they're quite masculine. There's something about the jacket and the top and so forth. And I have wondered, and I've no basis for this at all, but in the 1920s and 30s, it was quite common for lesbians to wear male clothes. There was a preoccupation with wearing monocles and so forth, if you start to delve in to the history of the gay community. And I have wondered if Nellie might have been gay. I have nothing to base this on, apart from the photos. But she didn't marry until 1927, which was quite late at the time. She would have been 34 then. She and Bill Purcell had been witnesses at eldest sister Kate and Tom Purcell's wedding, so they'd known each other 13 years. They also gave the address when they got married. They were both living at the same address. So I've had a little question mark. They never had children. I have wondered, was this perhaps a marriage of convenience? The marriage certificate of Bill Purcell and Nellie Purcell brings up a few interesting points. They both gave the same address, 64 West 98th Street. It was the first marriage for both. And the witnesses weren't family members. The witnesses were Patrick and Elizabeth Collins. There might be a perfectly rational explanation for it. I'm sure there is, but it just struck me as a little odd. And Nellie gives her name as Nellie Marie Hayes. Well, that's a new one on me. She certainly wasn't christened that. So I don't know if that was some sort of trend at the time. And we have William Leo Purcell. I've no idea if he was christened with Leo as a middle name or not. But very handy to be able to download all these various certificates. She's got a very confident look about her, Nellie. She fascinates me. I think she's great. At the time, most people having their picture taken looked a bit awkward or sort of they didn't know what to do with their hands and their arms, and
They're very rigid. But she always looks directly at the camera. She's got a very confident look. If she had been gay at the time, this would have caused her many problems or difficulties within her own sort of personal life. It was a criminal offence, I believe, at that time in America. So the gay community was quite a secret. So who knows? Perhaps you can read too many things where there's a very simple explanation. Very sadly, Nellie didn't reach old age. She died before she was 50 of breast cancer. And even sadder, or perhaps slightly poetic, her husband died within a month of her, Bill Purcell, of illuminated gas poisoning. They used to have gas lighting in the tenement blocks where they lived in New York, and I gather this was a not unknown cause of death, that the gas became poisonous, or perhaps it became unlit, but his actual cause of death is illuminated gas poisoning. So food for thought, perhaps a lesson in don't read, things into photos that aren't there, or perhaps maybe there was something there. I don't know. I hope she was happy. She looks like she took life by the scruff of the neck and enjoyed herself. So God bless Nellie.
The next picture was found at the house. I'm not 100% sure on the people in it, but I think that the person on the left, who I believe to be a woman, is Julia. Now, this would go cap in hand, so to speak, with the previous photos, insofar that she's been kind of erased, sort of thing a child would do, I suppose. I don't know why. I don't understand. But that's in the photo. The little girl in the foreground, I believe, is probably Eileen. I'm not 100% sure. Although she is wearing what looks like a dress of similar material to the dress that Julia was wearing in the previous photos, and knowing that Julia was a seamstress, that's possibly a handmade dress from Julia that Eileen is wearing. And the woman standing on what I presume is a log or something similar, I think is Nellie. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that's Nellie. We strangely have the man in the background, yet again, I don't know if it's a different man, staring at the proceedings that are going on, but as I've said before, a camera must have been unusual in these parts. Where this is set, I'm really not sure. I'm going to guess at the ruins at the bottom of the hill, the old houses, but looks like a tallish building in the background, which doesn't really ring true. So I'm really not sure. This is obviously a stone-built store, or perhaps a house. I really don't know what it is. And I'm not 100% on any of the details in this picture, but these are my best guesses. Now, the last three photos were all negatives, so we'd never seen the prints of these, and they all have in them a rather delightful lady and her two young children. Now, we didn't recognise the lady, we didn't recognise the children, so I must thank Patrick Hurley for pointing us in the right direction. Now, Eileen would often talk about a fellow farmer called John Manley. Now, that's the way we heard it. It's actually spelt O'Mahony. I apologise to anybody Irish, but John Manley was how we heard it. So I'm going to call this the Manley Farm. and John at the time would have been a small boy. So I'm guessing that he is the child on the left, and his sister, and he had two sisters, so this could be either Nora or Eileen, is on the right. And the woman in the picture, I would presume to be his mother, who was called Helena. It's a super photo of 100 years ago, virtually, how an Irish farmyard would have looked. The horse and cart, or rather just the cart in the background, is splendid. And the house at the top right is the Dempsey's house, which is still there, as is the Manley house. The Dempsey house is on the road going up to Eileen's, on the corner where you can go down to Prison Cove. So this was, although not Hayes, this is a wonderful find, I felt. You can contrast the previous picture now with the same yard. This was taken some 15 years ago. So you can see the stepping of the buildings in the background, as it is more or less today. The next photo is still in the same location, the backyard, and obviously Elena with the two children again, with a slightly more acute angle on the buildings there. The final picture has Helena outside the front of the house now. If you look above the front door, you can just about see there's a sort of unusual V shape in the render. And if you look at the current photo, or the 15-year-old photo, you can very clearly see the V in the building still today. So we can accurately say that the buildings are one and the same. This is a wonderful photograph. I love the little details, like the chair she's sitting on. If you look at it closely, it's quite unusual, the base of it. And then you've got the cart, as I said before, in the background, and the farmyard, and the children, what they're dressed in, and Helena herself in what appears to be a silk dress. So I can perhaps presume that she dressed up especially for the photograph. Who knows? It's just a great photo.